Yes, Chiefs fans, Matt Derrick is back with us to set us straight on a couple things because right now I'm feeling like it's Groundhog Day or The Matrix. In fact, that goes really well with what we did find out today because they, in a flashback to the original film, said, dodge this, and they made it out of there. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
The editor and chief of ChiefsDigest.com is Matt Derrick. How are you, Matt?
I am doing well, although, of course, people who follow me know that the editing part of is sometimes my biggest challenge.
Somebody asked me to edit something once. I said no.
I can edit. I'm great at editing other people's work. I'm terrible at editing my own work.
Well, then that'll be our next joint going forward when we start our own media mogul company, because I'll need the help. So the aforementioned Matrix bullet that I was referencing is one Orlando Brown. It looks like, knock on wood, he has successfully pulled a Trinity and missed all those bullets. He was back out there today, wasn't he?
Yeah, Andy Reid said he did everything out there, which, doesn't jive completely with being limited on the transaction report. And right now, I mean, this time of year, what is essentially a Wednesday practice on a Tuesday is a very light, no helmets, no shells. It's a 90-minute breezy practice. So there's not a lot to it. Let's see what happens on Wednesday / the Thursday type practice. I mean, that's the one that's intense. Let's see how Orlando Brown's listed there. But no, I mean, the Chiefs clearly feel like they did dodge a bullet, that it was just a little bit of a tweak. Could he have played in a pinch? Maybe. They certainly didn't want to push things on Sunday, but no, I mean, everything at this point looks clear. So they feel like that they're in pretty good shape. Whether that means they might give him Sunday off just because they can, and they want to make sure that he gets rested, we'll see. But no, I mean, I think that if you're a Chiefs fan, I don't think you have to worry big time about Orlando Brown right now.
That's definitely a relief. And it's funny that you mentioned it because this is like a Wednesday. They're back out there. They've started their week, and that is all because they got flexed to Saturday. Was there any inkling about that, or did this catch the team by surprise here?
Depends on who you ask. I think that maybe there was some inkling on Sunday that maybe this was a possibility. But remember, I mean, how this whole thing unfolded in the NFL is really a kind of a crock. I mean, the NFL was originally going to announce it after Monday night's game. And teams around the league were like, no, if we're going to play in this Saturday game and you're not going to tell us until Monday night, no, that's not going to happen. So then the league scrambled to get everything put together Sunday night. And that's why the late announcement, so late that Anthony Hitchens told us that he didn't know about it until Monday morning.
Oh, wow.
So there were, and he thought that a lot of the other players were in the same boat. And remember, I mean, they fly back from Cincy. They're probably tired and a little ticked off. So maybe they weren't watching the Sunday night game, and certainly maybe not till the very, very bitter end. They were in bed. But Andy Reid certainly seemed like he knew Sunday night, but I got to think that there was some inkling that this was a possibility, even Sunday afternoon, that the Chiefs might be in that game.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that Denver game coming up here a little bit later in the show, folks, but they also have an opportunity to get a couple of reinforcements back as well. Matt, just as we started here, what happened today?
Yeah, they've designated Chris Lammon's cornerback and special teams ace and defensive tackle Colin Saunders to return from injured reserve. This opens up that 21-day window, which they can practice before they return to the active roster. Doesn't have to be that long. We saw it last week with Jerick McKinnon, only practiced 3 days before they brought him back to the active roster. So it doesn't need to be 21 days, but that starts the clock, which certainly tells you that there's a real possibility that both those guys could be back for the playoff run.
I think that's really good news. I don't know that I was expecting Saunders in particular to come back. It was a knee, I believe, right?
Yeah, he had a knee issue.
I was concerned that it might be one that just lingers throughout the season. Certainly with what we saw last week, being able to keep the defensive line fresh, that's a plus. Being able to have a little more oomph on the special teams that I thought played actually really well against the Bengals. Lammon's certainly adds to that. We're going to get into the aftermath of what we take away from that Cincinnati game. But both of those guys could end up, like you said, it could be very short turnaround. We might not see them to the playoffs either, right?
Yeah, it could very well be. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I could see that if they're both healthy, possibly bringing them back for the Denver game, because it would be an opportunity, I think, to play. Saunders is very interesting to me because the Chiefs have only been carrying 8 defensive linemen the last few weeks, and that's low for them. I mean, they usually like to bring 9 or 10, even have 9 active on game day some days. For that depth. So they really need some reinforcements there. So getting Saunders back would be a big deal for that defensive line. Let them go in the rotation a little bit deeper. Lammons obviously is a really nice, special teams piece. That would be great to have for the playoff run if they can get him back fully healthy. It's not a huge impact, but special teams gunners, especially good as Lammons, that's a big deal. So I know Dave Tope would be happy to get him back.
I certainly am, and that should help them. I think at this point they are in playoff mode. They should be. We're going to get into what that game did and what we have to take away from it coming right here. No matter what your New Year's resolution is this year, it's about getting fit or getting healthier, whichever you want. Make sure that you enjoy and add Built Bar to your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're incredible in all kinds of different flavors, and they make them even better. Use it as your resolution this year because it tastes so good. It takes you so far in what you want to do. It's not chalky or waxy or anything negative. It allows you to get the protein that you need, all the macros that you need without having to spend a whole lot of calories there and without having to worry about what the ingredients are that you're ingesting. They're covered in 100% chocolate, and they cover all kinds of things, generally around 130 to 150 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein on average. And there's all kinds of flavors for every palate out there. Whether it's post-workout or filling in for a meal, you can find something that you want. I personally love all the cookie dough ones as well as the coconut-based flavors. And there's all kinds of new ones always lighting off every week. All you have to do is go to built.com and use the promo code. You get 15% off of your order. The promo code is LOCKED15 for Locked On Network, and that's 15% off of your order at built.com. So, Matt, that was a tough game to watch. We talked after the ball game almost immediately. I'm still frustrated with the lack of defense on any side of the ball and, all the other things that go into it. But at the end of the day, that defensive front, I think, was the best unit on the field for the day. Closely followed by the offensive line unit. So getting Saunders back certainly helps, but what can we take from in terms of the way the defensive line was used? What do you expect to see this coming week? Is there anything that gives you any pause, especially with both the trenches?
Yeah, this Denver's game got me very interested because we're not entirely sure what kind of shape that Denver's going to be in. So, what exactly the Chiefs are attacking is going to be of note. But because that's where I think that this game is going to be kind of interesting. I mean, if the Chiefs have anybody that's borderline injury wise, I think that they could give them a rest. And, and one of those people that I'm interested in is Chris Jones, because, Chris talked about being a little bit worn out after his visit on the COVID list. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen a Chris Jones without the same kind of energy that he's had the last couple of games. So, I think there's probably a few other guys that fit into that category too. I mean, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, I don't think either one of them were, what we normally see against the Bengals. But when you get to the lines in particular, I mean, one, I want to give huge credit to that Chiefs offensive line for the job that they did against the Bengals. That was amazing. I mean, there's plenty of teams around the league that if they lose 2 of their top tackles, especially their starting left tackle, it's going to turn into a disaster, a dumpster fire. Yeah. And the Chiefs didn't let that happen. I mean, Joe Thuney is the kind of guy that if the Chiefs wanted to consider him as a left tackle in the future, I'd be listening. I mean, they're paying him like a left tackle. I'd listen. I mean, there's always some work to do and everything, but I mean, I think I've told you before. I mean, I feel like that guy is a Terminator. Well, sometimes it doesn't matter.
Okay.
But that
Folks,
guy's a Terminator.
I'm making an arm length gesture.
Yes,
he's
got the dinosaur arms. That guy's a Terminator sent from the future to block for quarterbacks. So that's all I'm saying. So I mean, and to me, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're going into the postseason, and now where this offensive line is, I mean, even despite the injuries, they're in such a better place than they were a year ago at this time with the injuries that they had. Even with the injuries that they have right now, I mean, they're in a better place than they were a year ago. So I think that's a really positive sign. Defensively, I mean, that's why I think that, getting a Colin Saunders back and even the possibility of a Joshua Kaindoh, who's also been, designated to return, if they can get some more depth on the defensive line, because I think they've been stretched a little thin, especially the last month. And I think it's showing. I mean, I don't think I think we're seeing them get off to good starts, because they certainly got off to a good start against Cincinnati. I thought that the pass rush particularly played really good early. And then I don't think we saw it as strong in the second half. And if some of that is the short bench, and some of that maybe is the COVID issues, maybe it's certainly give other teams, credit for adjustments. But I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, the Chiefs right now could really use an infusion of some depth and rotation.
Yeah, I think so as well. And one name that you didn't mention to me, and this was a game against the Bengals that saw, quite frankly, a return to the early season in terms of the rate of missed tackles. And it was spread out over a number of things. But one in particular was the leader of this defense, Tyrann Mathieu, who freshly came off of the COVID list here recently as well. I felt like there might have been a wind issue with him as well. Does that ring true with you?
I mean, certainly could have been. I mean, I think that, certainly with the way that game played out, Sunday, I think you saw it a little bit. And, some of it was simply that this defense hasn't had to work that hard the last 6 or so weeks. I mean, they haven't had issues where they've been having to chase a guy 72 yards downfield. I mean, that's going to, at Tyrann's age, bless his heart and all, I know he doesn't want to hear that, but that's going to take a little bit of bite out of you. I mean, that's going to take a bite out of any defense when you give up some of these big plays and you're chasing these guys around and you're on the field as much as they were. I mean, he's not a fresh chicken anymore. And I know that's not the great expression to use, but I'm going to stick with it.
Somebody from Louisiana understands what bless his heart means in reality. So you're just careful is all I'm saying. But I agree with you. And I think you can see that through the season. And I still feel, and I want your take on upon reflection, with all that wrapped into it, fatigue, the COVID stuff, all of it, it just felt like the entire effort kind of took for granted what the Bengals were, from the coaching game plan down to what the players' instincts were telling them in terms of how to react to some of the things. It just felt like this was a game that snuck up on them. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think it was, if anything, I think it was just that the wrong things snuck up on them. I mean, the Chiefs did a much better job than the Ravens did the week before of blowing smoke on Joe Burrow and just, complimenting him. Probably should have spent a little bit more time complimenting Jamar Chase. I mean, maybe if you call him a young Randy Moss, maybe you would have covered him a little bit more. But I mean, it just struck me as a defense that went into a game with a game plan that just did not fit the opponent. And we haven't talked about, I haven't heard a lot of talk about this, but I also think that, the Chiefs defense in the second half was even complicated by the fact that even if they made adjustments, the Bengals had to make adjustments too, because Joe Burrow was hurt in that second half. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Mm-hmm. That knee was bothering him. And they were calling things differently. I mean, that was a different game plan in the second half from the Bengals because they had to, because their quarterback was playing on one leg. And, and I think the Chiefs made some adjustments from the first half, not all the adjustments that they needed. I mean, they still needed to pay a little bit more attention to Jamar Chase. But I think that just, stymied the defense a little bit too, of, they saw a different Bengals team in the second half than they did in the first half. And I don't think they were prepared for that either.
Yeah, I think that certainly makes sense. I think the bigger concern for me is that it feels very much like what we heard post Super Bowl, that, hey, we didn't expect this. We didn't prepare for this. And that misread, I think, is something that if it were early in the season, if it was the first half of the season, like we saw, we were having a lot of issues, right? At this point, I think it's more concerning that you're having that kind of misread from the game planning aspect of it. That's my big takeaway for the week, is players did what they could, but there were problems from the get-go.
Yeah, there were. I mean, and these were the bigger problem to me is that we saw things that we haven't seen from this defense in a while. We saw misreads, we saw missed tackles, we saw miscommunications. I mean, it was the same kind of mistakes that they were making back in September that we just hadn't been seeing for a while. And those are the kind of mistakes that you can't make against an offense like Cincinnati's. I don't think you can make it against offenses like the Chargers. I don't think you can make it against Buffalo. I mean, there's some of these offenses that, with the way that they're going to attack the Chiefs, I mean, you just can't make those mistakes. I mean, they could probably get away with it against certain teams, but I think that there's certainly some teams that you can't get away with that. And this Bengals team is absolutely one of them.
Yeah. They might be able to get away with it next week. We're going to talk about the upcoming game against the Broncos to close out the regular season and just how important it is coming up right here. Hey, Chiefs fans, want to let you know about an incredible app that everybody who drives or buys gas all by itself needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. Our listeners right now, you get 25 cents off of every gallon that you buy once you sign up with Get Upside. Then on top of it, they're offering right now with a promo code of touchdown, an extra 25 cents, a bonus that you get back. That's 50 cents cash back on every gallon of gas that you buy in your first tank with the Get Upside app. There's a lot of people that drive around and put a lot of miles and a lot of gallons into their vehicles, and they're making a lot of cash back on this. All you have to do to become one of them is to sign up, get that app, Get Upside, and use the promo code touchdown. Then you can get all your rewards back through your bank account, PayPal, or e-card, whatever you would like. Go over there, get the Get Upside app, and use that promo code touchdown. Denver to close the season. It's going to be chilly. It might even be snowy. We're going to have to see what the weather holds true. Like, I'm about...
Love a good snow game.
Right? I'm 40 minutes from the stadium right now, and I can't see that far. So it's going to be interesting. But this is, like we talked about earlier in the show, it's a chance to rest some guys if they need it. It's also a chance to get a look at some of the younger guys. I could see Boodle playing in this game again. I could see Baker playing in this game. At this point, what's the balance for you about trying to wash the taste of the loss to the Bengals out of your mouth versus trying to rest and be prepared for what, unless you are, sending reinforcements to Houston, you're going to be in the wild card game?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is certainly maybe just a measure of what do you need to beat the Broncos, which I don't think is going to be much, because I think this is a Broncos team that certainly shows evidence of not having any interest in, being around any longer. I mean, you certainly get to that point with some teams that, hey, they've already got the golf clubs packed and they're ready to go. And this Denver team absolutely strikes me of that. I mean, they've got injury problems. They've had COVID problems. Nobody knows that they're going to be back next season. Coaches, players, I mean, everybody. I mean, and on top of that, 17th game, that nobody wants to play anyway. So the only teams that want to play the 17th game are the teams that are in the playoffs and want to keep going. And for everybody else, they're ready to check out. So I don't think there's any doubt you've got a little bit of that mentality, but the Chiefs have to win this game. I mean, you can't just fold it in. I mean, this isn't a game you can just say, hey, it's okay if we lose. It's not okay if you lose. I mean, you need to give yourself the best possible chance to get that 1 seed, because that 1 seed means more than anything. Mm-hmm. So even if it's a small chance to get it, you got to play for it. But that being said, for all the reasons that you mentioned, I mean, as far as the weather goes and some of the other issues, if you've got guys that are banged up, I mean, Orlando Brown, if he's nursing that calf injury, there wouldn't be any reason to shut him down. But hey, Patrick Mahomes, he's going to play. I mean, unless a Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce are hurt, they're going to play. You have to. But at the same time, I mean, if this game gets out of hand, I think that Andy would be much more, ready to hit the bench and go to the backups earlier than he's gone in some other blowout situations this year.
Yeah, I have to hope that that's the case. Like, protect what you can protect, because at the end of the day, holding your part of this bargain shouldn't be that difficult. The bigger question will be, can Chris Conley and David Culley, 2 ex-Chiefs down in Houston, pull something out of their hat and blow up the Titans for us? We'll find out. And I say us because today I just feel like including myself. I also want to include one other shout out, because an older tight end had a visit with the Chiefs today that I thought might have been a fit a year ago. Matt Bushman, BYU tight end, long, tall, can block. I think there's a possibility there. We'll see what happens with it. Just wanted to mention that to everybody, because now it becomes, do you then reel in your offense as well? We saw them move the ball pretty well. Mahomes had, again, throwback to earlier in the season, a couple of turnover-worthy plays, to quote Pro Football Focus. But do you dumb down the offense at this point and just kind of keep it simple, not put anything new on tape? I feel like that was part of what bit the Chiefs in the rear in the second half last week. Do you think that we see that continue as well?
That wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I could certainly see the Chiefs being reluctant to put anything too new out there, especially because, I mean, I feel like they certainly don't feel like that they need it. This is a game that I think that they feel pretty good about, especially with the fact that I think that this team, as you mentioned, I mean, they want to get the taste of this loss out of their mouth. And, with Anthony Hitchens, I asked him, earlier today about just, whether he was real happy about having to play in this Saturday game. And part of it was that he said, absolutely. He's like, I want to get back and, practicing and playing as fast as possible, to put this game behind him. And that was certainly more the attitude of Andy Reid than I've ever heard him before with, just wanting to put a game behind him. I mean, he was no interest whatsoever in continuing to talk about it on a Tuesday. Yeah. And these guys are ready. So, I mean, I think that there's going to be this is a team that definitely wants to go out and get that taste out of their mouth. They want to prove some things. They want to go into the playoffs on a good note. They don't want to be on a 2-game losing streak. Andy Reid certainly doesn't want that. So, I mean, for a lot of reasons, I think you're going to see a intense Chiefs team, but I don't think you're going to see them terribly creative either. I don't think they're going to try and reinvent the wheel this week. Bread and butter.
Okay. I like that. And that's perfectly fine. I expect vanilla. But to take it that next step farther, if this is the Matrix again, I'm going to stay with the theme today, folks. If I poke a hole in the sky and the sun comes down, is there a ray of sunshine from this ball game that does set them up for the postseason run? Is this enough motivation? Is this a kick in the rear enough to maybe push them a little farther than, hey, we're still Kansas City, we can still do what we want? Like I said it the other night that it reminded me of what the Bucs went through and were able to come back in the postseason, obviously. After a couple of days reflection, does that feel like that's a possibility to you?
I think it is. I mean, I think that between this and that Chargers game that was, a very hard fought, close game, I think these are two contests that absolutely send a message to this team to let them know that once they get to the postseason, B and C games aren't going to get it done. And I think this team gets that. I think it's a team that I think even in the 8-game winning streak, I think it showed that they've got that mode. It's not terribly uncommon to see teams that have had the success that the Chiefs have had get bored during the regular season. I mean, it happens. So I could certainly see, a lack of focus during the first half of the season. I mean, and I think that was a part of the issues early on. I mean, I think that it was a team that's been through a lot and they know that, hey, there's a reservoir of greatness that they've got that they can tap into when they need it for the playoffs. But I think the Bengals game, I think the Chargers game, I think that the coaches can certainly use this going into the postseason to say, you can't take Cincinnati for granted. If you see them in the playoffs, you can't take them for granted because they beat you in the mouth. You can't take the Chargers for granted. I think that's enough to tell them, remind them you can't take Buffalo for granted. I mean, there's going to be some teams that they're going to face that I think are just as good if in the same ballpark as the Chiefs. The question is going to be to me is that enough of a message to, make them deal with maybe a couple of other teams that they might see into the playoffs? I mean, I don't think that Indy is on the same level as the Chiefs. I think they're a flawed team. Everybody in the AFC's got some flaws, but I think Indy's a little bit more flawed than the other playoff teams. But is this enough of a message to say you got to bring your A game against the Colts too if you see them?
Needs to be. Flat out. No way around it there. We're going to see how they perform. We're going to get some inside information from Cody Roque tomorrow. Make sure you hit that with Chris. Matt, thanks for all the time and your insights today.
Always, my friend. Take care, everybody.
Folks, stay tuned for Friday as well. We'll get you ready for this game. And, hey, we'll probably do a post game. Matt, I hope you're available. If not, they're just going to have to listen to me yak, so that'll be fine.
I will be there.
Rock and roll. Folks, have a great day. Thank you.